Well, a very warm welcome to you guys. Hello, it's Kasim, and welcome to another episode of Journal Entries. Want to firstly start off by thanking you very much for watching. I want to start off by thanking you very much for taking the time to listen to me today as I share with you some of my sort of journal notes, as I share with you some things that I've been thinking about over the last kind of couple of days that I hope can really add some value to the quality of your life and in some way can help you to become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. So in today's episode, there's three different things that I was journaling about that I want to share with you, and I hope that they can help inspire you in some way to start your own journaling. There are three things that I want to talk to you about. And number one, I want to talk to you about the fact that there has to be room in your life for movement, and it is related to what you've seen today's title as being that you can't be too radical in your thinking, in your attitude, in your belief system, that you don't leave room for growth, you don't leave room for movement. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is I want to talk about the three big personal questions that I think are really important to ask ourselves. And the third one that I want to talk to you about, that I've been journaling about, is do you want to be the exception or do you want to be part of the rule? So, as most of you guys know, in case you've never watched journal entries, the whole reason why I share my journal entries and things that I've been thinking about in my own personal life is that I hope that I can inspire you to start your own journaling so that you can write down for yourself what is success, what is failure, what does it mean to be a man, what does it mean to live a good life, and hopefully you can take the compilation of your ideas, your ideologies, your experience and the skills that you've acquired over your life so far and pass it on to the next generation. Because the reality of life is that some of you guys who are listening to me, you may never become a CEO, you may never become some multi-millionaire, you may never get to a position where you are in a position of high influence where you can maneuver people and help them reach higher echelons of life. But every single person has the ability and has had the opportunity to learn life lessons, to experience life, to acquire skills, and to get knowledge as they've been living their life. And hopefully you can use that compilation of all of those different aspects of your life and pass it on to the next generation. All right, cool. So let's go into the three things that I want to talk to you about today. And I want to begin by talking to you about this topic, which is something that I've been thinking about recently, which is around that there has to be room in your life for movement. I've been thinking a lot about this topic around being radical and being able to become an open-minded kind of person, because when I first started off doing these videos and I first started off sharing my ideas and I first started off really discovering who I was and what I believed and what I stood for, I realized that one of the things that started to happen is that I started to conflict with people. Because it's okay for us to have conviction and it's okay for us to have belief systems. But what I've had to kind of learn as I've grown and as I've developed is there has to be some room for life. There has to be some room in our philosophies, in our identities, in our ideologies, in our habits, in our perceptions for life. There has to be room for us to grow. There has to be room for us to redefine some of the things that we believe to be the truth. And I tell you this because I've been really thinking about this, where if you look at much of the conflict that happens between me and you look at the conflict in relationships, much of them comes about as a result where one person or a bunch of people essentially refuse to move from the space in which they operate. They say, this is the way the world is. They say, well, you are the person who is doing me wrong and I'm not doing anything wrong. And what ends up happening is the fact that, there is no movement, there is no room for us to budge either way is what causes a lot of the conflict. It is really ultimately what is the root of so many problems that occur in the world. It's interesting that I was looking at people like Mussolini, Idi Amin, Hitler, and I was trying to determine what is it that allowed these men and women to be able to commit such atrocities. I mean, we live in a world where there were loads of people in Germany. How can all of these people allow this one man to be able to rise to such a position in life where he was able to kill all those Jews? How is that even possible? And one of the things that I found was that part of the reason that this was able to happen is because these individuals surrounded themselves with a circle of people, and they never allowed anybody else outside of their circle. In other words, they had a small circle of people who were basically like an entourage, right? They just constantly kept feeding these individuals. They were like yes people who came in and just agreed with you. This is part of the reason why, as Kasim, I've had to learn that, Cass, you have to surround yourself with people who oppose you directly. Because if you don't surround yourself with people who oppose you directly, what's going to end up happening is, Cass, that you may believe that something is absolutely true and something is absolutely right and something is absolutely the truth, but you might find out later on that you're absolutely wrong, and you may have caused so much damage in your life and to other people that it's irreversible now. And so I've had to learn in my own life, particularly me, because I have to have strong opinions on stuff in order to share it with you, is that whilst I may share something with you, I always have to be open to the fact that things can change. Right? What I liked 20 years ago is different to what I like today. The goals that I wanted 5 years ago are different to the goals that I want today. For example, one of the things that I've had to learn in my own life is that, look, it's okay for me, for example, to believe certain things and to believe people should behave in a certain way and to believe that people should hold themselves to a certain standard. But the point being is that I have to be wise in thinking to know when is appropriate for me to have those conversations. For example, obviously I did spend most of my life looking at personal development, looking at improvement, but with people in my life, I mean, I'm talking about friends, my brother, my sister, my family, I rarely, and I try my very best not to talk about success and improvement and development, because it just isn't appropriate. When they see me, they don't really want to talk to me about what I do as what I define as my purpose, as my mission. They want to talk to me about, Kasim, how was the football? Kasim, how is your health? Cass, have you been to any music festivals recently? How are you dealing with the virus at the moment? That's what they really want to know about. They're not really interested in all of that fancy stuff, which I personally may find really interesting. And I think part of this, I think there is a space in many of us that's missing, where a lot of us have a lot of conviction, we have a lot of beliefs, we have a lot of ideologies about how the world should be, about the patriarchy, about how there is equal rights and whatever. But one of the things that I think a lot of us we're missing wisdom. We don't understand that, yes, it's absolutely good to believe something and to stand for something, but you have to know when you've gone too far. You have to know when you've stepped over the boundaries. You have to know that, okay, it's good for you to believe something, but are you putting your point across to the degree that you're bashing other people down, that you're breaking other people down, that you're essentially getting people to the point where they don't even want to be in your space because you're so toxic, you're so aggressive, you're so full on that it's just not enjoyable being in your space. And I was thinking about this because for me as Kasim, I've had to think, hold on a minute, Cass. It's all very nice for you to have these ideologies. It's all very nice for you to believe these things. But if you believe these things to the degree that you alienate everybody, nobody feels as if they can relate to you, nobody feels as though they understand you, and when people come into your space, it's almost as if they know they're going to get into a confrontation with you, you're going to end up with loads of knowledge, with loads of success, but you're going to have no friends, you're going to have no connections, no associations. You're not going to be able to have a wholesome kind of life where you can have people who love you, people who care for you, people who challenge you. And it's just something that I've been really thinking about recently, and I would share and ask you to think about in your own life. to challenge yourself and ask yourself, do you believe some things so strongly to the degree that you're alienating everybody in your life? People don't even want to start a conversation with you about football. People don't even want to start a conversation with you about politics, because all you're going to do is you're going to beat them down, you're going to belittle them and make them feel like they're absolute shit, because of course you have more knowledge than they do. Of course you've read the statistics better than they do, right? But what I'm saying to you is, I've just found, and for me as Kasim, I have to be even more careful of this, that if I'm going to have these debates and these really strong opinions, I have to know when to use them. I need to be having, when I have and I'm operating from a space of conviction, it's okay for me to have that conviction when I'm going up against somebody who maybe has the same level of knowledge about success and about personal development and about how somebody can rise from the bottom and can improve their life. I can have that with somebody who's been studying that. But I have to realize that I cannot have that level of intensity, that level of debate with somebody who is just a normal person, and they just want to talk about football. They just want to talk about the golf. They just want to talk about what was on EastEnders and what was on Hollyoaks. It isn't right that I belittle somebody to the degree and say to them that because they are somebody who on the weekends they prefer to sit at home and watch TV instead of maybe going out there and trying to serve people, trying to follow their passion, trying to go out there and do some volunteering. It isn't my place to be telling them how to live their life and that is wrong, a wrong way for them to live their life. That isn't my place. That's their life. It's their decision to decide whether that is the truth for them and how they want to live their life. And it's just something I would just encourage you, because you might be in a position where you're like me. You have strong opinions, these things you believe very strongly, but the issue is it's alienating you. You're ending up alone. Nobody really wants to interact with you because it's always a confrontation. You're such hard work to be around. Like, it isn't fun to be around you. Like, when somebody has an interaction with you or they want to ask you for advice, sometimes they don't need some fucking long-winded answer. They just need a yes or no answer. Give me this one or give me that one. And as Cass, this is something that I've really had to work on. Because sometimes people will ask me, Cass, what would you rather, this or this? Should I go for this job or that job? And they're not looking for me to give them some convoluted, hypothetical, researchical answer. They just want to say an answer of that one or this one. That's what they're looking for. And I've had to really think about this and really heighten my level of wisdom in discerning, is this person looking for an ABC kind of answer? Do they want the truth? Because, I didn't realize that some people, for example, is something that I had to learn about women. Sometimes women tell you a problem, but they're not looking for you to solve the problem for them. They're just looking for you to listen. They just want to share the problem with you, but they don't really want you to go and solve the problem for them. They don't want you to give them an answer. Here's something else that I found. I found that some people, they want to give you their problem, but they just want you to agree with them. They want you to agree that times are shit and that things are better. And my inclination as Kasim is naturally, well, if things are really shit, don't worry about them because you can't control them anyway. Do what you can. Be positive. Things want to get better. But sometimes people aren't looking for that positivity and that enthusiasm, right? They're not looking for that. They want me to agree with them and say, well, it is shit. And that actually, for them, is better than me going and telling them how times are going to be good and how times are going to be better and they should they're not interested in that shit. They just need me to be their friend, to be there for them, to agree with them. And as Cass, is something that I've had to really work on and try to discern with myself between, is that what they're looking for? And it's just something that I would share with you as a person, and I would ask you to consider that. Is that something you need to think about in your life? Are you so focused on football, on personal development, on business, that sometimes when you see your friends or you see people who you're interacting with, that is your world? That actually sometimes they just want to talk about the weather, but all you are focused on is personal development, on the football, are you a wholesome kind of person? It's just something that I thought that I would share with you, and that I, as Kasim, I've just been thinking about recently. So the second thing that I wanted to share with you, which I've been thinking about, is around this question of, do I want to be the exception, and what is the price for that? So most of you, I'm sure you've heard of that phrase, which goes something on the lines of, there is always an exception to every rule, right? I'm sure you've heard of that expression. And what I found is, essentially, and I'm generalizing here, most of life is pretty consistent. For example, if we looked at, let's say, bodybuilding, to become a bodybuilding champion, most bodybuilders have to follow a certain kind of path. They have to do certain kinds of poses. They have to do similar type of training, right? I think we can kind of agree with that. Now, obviously, some people may go to the gym 7 times a week. Some people may go and work out legs 3 times a week or once a week. Different people, different things. But in spite of that, there is always an exception. There is some people who only go to the gym twice a week, and they will be able to have a body which somebody has to go to the gym 7 days a week to be able to achieve. If, let's say the example of a relationship. The average relationship doesn't realistically last 40, 50 years. That's the average relationship, just doesn't last for that period of time. But as we all know, there are some relationships that do. And so the thing that I've been really thinking about is, life is essentially built on a set of systems and a set of rules, and everything is kind of predictable, and there is certain systems and certain lifestyles and certain goals and certain ambitions. And the thing that I was thinking about is, do you want to be part of the system and part of that rule and part of that kind of network, or do you want to be the exception? And I'm not saying that there is one is better than the other, because, as I say, we're all different and we all want different things. And the thing that I've been thinking about for myself is, okay, obviously you can become an exception, right? Because some of you guys might say, actually, Cass, I know that a lot of people end up... I was having a conversation with my sister, and my sister was saying to me, Cass, I don't want to get married because there's a 50% chance that I might get divorced. And I said to my sister, yeah, I know, Amina, but whilst there is a 50% chance that you might get divorced, there is also a 50% chance that your relationship is going to work out, that you're going to make it, that you're going to be one of the other 50% who make it through, who become a success. And I was thinking that if you do decide that you want to be the exception, that you want to be the person who breaks the rules and does the thing that is different, that obviously comes at a price. That there is a price that comes with being different. There is a price that comes. For example, some of you might decide that you would like to be somebody who has 3, 4, 5, 6 properties which are rented out, and that you create an income from. The average person doesn't have 3, 4, 5, 6 properties rented out. And so what I'm saying to you is that would be an exception, and that there is a price that you have to pay for that exception. And I was just thinking that a lot of people don't realize and don't pay attention to the fact that whilst you can have everything, you cannot have everything all at once, which means that something has to be sacrificed, something has to be given up for you to be part of the exception. But in the same principle, when we look at somebody who decides that they would like to be part of the system, somebody who would like to have a normal job, they want to work for a company for 20, 30 years of their life, they want to go down their job giving them a pension, they want stability. If that is the life that you want, that means that there is also a price that you have to pay for that kind of life. For example, you're not going to be able to have the kind of freedom to be able, if you own your own business and you decided, you know what, I own my business, I have people who work for me, so I'm going to take 1 month off. I'm going to take 2 months off this year, and I'm going to go traveling. You could do that if you owned your own business. You wouldn't have to ask for permission from anyone. But if you were working for a company, you can't just do that, right? You would need to give an explanation. You would need to give really good reasons. There is no guarantee that your job is going to be there when you come back, right? So do you see what I mean? There is a price that you have to pay. And I was just thinking how many of you guys who are listening to me, whether you've decided which path that you're going to go down. Are you going to go down the path where you've decided that you're going to be part of the exception, or have you chosen to be part of the rule, to be part of the normal people who end up operating from the certain space? And if you have, what is the price that you've had to pay to get that? And I say this to you because there are some of you who are listening to me, and it's the reason why I was thinking about this for myself is that a lot of us, what we tend to do is we refuse to choose to go into either one of these bands. We want a hybrid. We want a combination. And the issue is, a combination works, but it is an even more refined version of either both of these. Does that make sense? It's a hybrid and a more refined version of fitting out, of being an anomaly. And what I'm saying to you is that if you decide not to either fit in, or you decide either not to stand out, it means that you are never really fully invested in something, which means that you're almost having to pay the price, double the amount of price that you should be paying. And a lot of the time, that's maybe part of the reason why you're not making progress in your life, right? Let me tell you specifically why I was thinking about this. So many of you guys know that I have a full-time job. I work for Tesco's, and at the same time I'm studying to become a counsellor, which will eventually lead me to become a clinical psychologist. And I've come to realise that if I really want to learn as much as I can and add value to you guys' life, I'm going to have to give up essentially working full-time to maintain a certain type of life and lifestyle in Tesco's, so that I can focus most of my attention on Casamotive, on learning about how I can add more value into your life, on refining my ideas, on refining my strategies, on refining my tactics. And when I'm in this state where I'm trying to work full-time in Tesco's and I'm trying to work full-time on Casamotive, it just doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work, and it means that I'm having to pay double the price because I'm never really exerting I'm almost always putting 50% of my energy into each one of these instead of 100% or 70% or 80% of my energy into one of these two areas. And it's just, I don't know whether you can relate or this is even really relative to you, but it's just something that I would ask you to consider. But branch it out, because what I mean by this is I'm not just talking about work or wealth. I mean in your relationship. You might be in a position now where you are playing 3, 4, 5 different girls. And you can do that, right? There is a place for you to play 3, 4 different girls. Or you might be somebody who's decided that you're going to stick to one girl. That's fine. There is a place for that as well. But what I'm saying is, that each one of these paths has advantages and disadvantages. And if you decide to try and create this hybrid, it just doesn't work. Rarely does it work. Now, in saying that, I did say earlier on, there is always an exception to every rule. But my point is, if you decide to be the exception, the sacrifice that you will have to pay will be greater. Do you know what the price is? So that's what I wanted to share with you in regards to that. The last thing that I wanted to share with you, which I've been thinking a lot about, is what you've seen in the title of today, which are these 3 big personal questions. So many of you will know that over the last 6 years, I've been looking at 2 questions. Number 1, how does somebody start with nothing and build an incredible life? Okay? You start off in a council estate, how do you get away from that? You were born into a household of people who are all obese, all overweight. How does somebody become an anomaly and break out of that? You've always been poor. Your entire lineage of family have all been poor. How do you break out of that and be the first person not to be poor? That's what I wanted to know, was my first question. Is that possible? And if it is, how does somebody even do that? Second question is it possible to do that and also be a good person and not step on other people to get there and not turn out to be a dickhead? And when you get to become successful, not end up like Heath Ledger and committing suicide, not end up like Whitney Houston and end up taking cocaine and essentially damaging your body, your mental health, being in toxic relationships, essentially running yourself into the grave. So my question was, are there people who have both mastered both those areas? They've got what they want starting from nothing, and they're a damn good person and they have an incredible life. Now, in the quest to that, I came to realize that if you're somebody who wants to have that kind of life, there are essentially three questions that you've got to ask yourself at some point. And I wanted to share them with you because I hope they can add some value to you. So the first one that I wanted to share with you is this. The first question is, what do you want? Now, I know this sounds ridiculous and it's kind of like, well, what do you mean, Cass? What do you mean, what do I want? I mean, have you ever sat down by yourself and you've said, do you know what? I know my mum wants me to do this. I know my mum wants me to get married to this kind of woman, a Pakistani, a Muslim, a woman who is homely, whatever, white, black, Chinese, whatever it may be. But what do I want? I know that most people end up working for a company, but what do I want to work for a company, or do I want to set my own business? I know a lot of people tend to work in offices, but would I like to work at home? Right? Do I want to be, what kind of life do I want to have? Do I want to have the kind of life where I work 6 months of the year and then I take 6 months off? What do I define to be success? What kind of life would I have to be living in order for me to be successful? Am I the kind of person who wants the highest level of success that they can? I mean, I have to have the best of everything. Right? I have to have the best cars. I mean Ferraris. I mean Bugattis. I have to have the biggest houses, so it has to be a mansion, 5, 6, 7 bedrooms. I have to have the fittest girl. She has to be a model, or she has to be like some Swiss goddess. I don't know. Or am I okay with just somebody who genuinely is a loving person? They're kind. They're always there for you. They're always loyal. Whatever. In other words, you have to come to a point in your life where you ask yourself what it is that you want. Not what you want based on society, not what you want based on your parents, not what you want based on because other people have it, but genuinely, for you as a person, you have to look inwards and ask yourself, what would I like to have? So that's one of the big first questions that I think is really important. And if you look around at society, I've got to tell you guys, you will be shocked at the amount of people who I ask, what do you want? And they have no clue. I mean, it sounds like people say to me every time I say this to them, they look at me as if like, what do you mean, Cass? Surely most people know what they want. Technically speaking, yes, most people do know what they want. But they've never actually decided that that is what they want. They've never sat down and said, right, genuinely, this is success. This is what I want in 5, 10, 16, 30 years. Now, guys, by me saying this, can I just put a side note? When I say that you decide what you want, this doesn't mean that you have to be married by 30. If you decide that you would like to get married, it doesn't mean that you have to be married by 30. It doesn't mean that everything is going to work out in a certain way. Because as most of you guys know by now, if you've lived around the life a little bit, it's all very nice you having plans, but life gets in the way, right? Sometimes you have to focus on your job. Sometimes you go through depression. Sometimes people let you down. Life just doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go, right? And so there has to be room in your life for improvisation, for life. So that's the first one. Decide what you want. Second thing that you have to decide is the experience that you want to have in life. So I think it's pretty evident. If you've looked around at life, you pretty much have noticed that being successful is not attributed to a certain race or a certain type of person or to a certain age, right? There are 20-year-olds who are millionaires. There are people who are 70 and have no savings. There are people who are black and have multiple businesses. There are people who are Chinese and they just like to play video games and they've never really held a job in their life. There are some people who are dickheads and they're owners of companies. So essentially what I realized was that, okay, you can have whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be a good person. That doesn't mean that you're going to be happy. That doesn't mean that you're going to be fulfilled, right? So the second question that you have to ask yourself at some point is, what is it going to take for me to get what I want in life and still be happy? And also, even deeper than that is, how do you define happiness? What does it mean in your definition to be happy? Is happiness having a family? Because you could say that happiness is having a family, right? And you almost will look at me as if I'm some nutcase, like, well, what do you mean, Cass? Of course, if you haven't got a family, how can you be happy? But I can tell you, I know loads of people who could think of nothing worse than being tied down to a family and you have kids and your kids rule your life. They ain't interested, mate. They don't want to have kids at all. They're just not interested, right? Now, you could psychological say, well, they will change, blah, blah, blah. It's not your job to tell people what they should be doing with their life. You mind your own business and you live your own life, is what I would say to you. Personally, as Kasim. So you've got to decide, what is happiness to you? Is happiness to you having a 3-bedroom house, semi-detached, in a village somewhere? Is happiness to you having the freedom to travel anywhere you want? Is a freedom for you having 100k in your bank account? Or happiness or joy? And actually, even bigger than that, an even bigger question is, do you even think that happiness is even that big of a thing? Because some people actually don't even think happiness is even that. It's not really an aspect of life which they think, in order for me to live a good life, I have to be happy, or I have to be fulfilled, or I have to be joyous or abundant. Some people don't even think that that is not what qualifies to them as making a remarkable life. And so for you, you may have to decide, because you might say, actually, Kasim, you might think, for example, like someone like Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was prepared to go to prison for 28 years of his life and sacrifice being with his wife, sacrifice his friends, sacrifice freedom, because he believed that his purpose was a bigger thing to him than his happiness, than his freedom. I don't know, maybe for you that is something that you thought about, but essentially my point being is, at some point you have to decide for yourself exactly what constitutes a good life. What are you the kind of person who says, Kasim, I am telling you now that if I am not a good person and I am not doing everything authentically, then I can never consider myself to be successful? I don't know, maybe that might be you, right? In which case, obviously, your journey is going to take longer, because if you want to do things the right way and you don't want to cheat anyone and you don't want to step on anybody, that means that your route is going to take longer. And that's just the truth. We all know that. If you decide to lie and cheat and whatever, you're probably going to get ahead quicker. Obviously, the world, I don't even want to get into this, but the world has been designed in such a way that cheaters and liars never, in the long run, ever make it, because eventually they get found out, right? You can only cheat and lie for so long before you're found out. But my point being is, if that may be something even you decide. You might be listening to me and saying to me, actually, Cass, I would much rather make £1 million and lie and cheat, but make it in 2 years than wait 20 years and get it. Might be for you. For example, you guys who are listening to me, you've heard of people who are robbers, right? Robbers want to become wealthy, but guess what they're prepared to do? They are not prepared to wait to do it the right way for 10, 15, 20, 30 years to become millionaires or to earn a lot of money, so they're prepared to take it. That you might be listening to me and you saying, well, Kasim, that's the path I want to go down. Some people, the way they become millionaires is by starting companies. But if you start your own company, it takes time to start a company. Sometimes your company may not make a lot of money until 40 years down the line. Are you prepared to wait 40 years? Or you could go and rob a bank and do it in a day? Do you see what I'm saying? It's all swings and roundabouts, and that's why you have to decide for yourself what it means. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you, which I think a lot of you guys have never really thought about very deeply, is around this question of what is your contribution? Because I know for a lot of you guys who are listening, this is probably at the moment not really going to be a problem for you. But believe this or not, there are some people who've got to a point in their life where they've got everything that they've ever dreamed of. And I know for a lot of people, that's like, Cass, how is that even possible? It's possible. Some people are married, they have a child, they have a great job, they make a lot of money, they own their own house, they have nearly paid off their mortgage, already paid off their mortgage, they have rental properties, they have great friendships, they get to travel around the world, they're healthy. I mean, genuinely, their life is pretty good. Now, you may not think that that is a problem, but it actually is a problem, right? It becomes a huge problem because it's like, what do you do when you're 35 and all of those things, you've reached them? Well, the answer is you go back and help other people essentially rise to the same level that you've managed to get to. And I don't even want to get into the complexities of how difficult it is for most people to get into that mindset of helping other people, because most of us, when we think about helping other people, psychologically what we think is, if I help somebody else, Cass, that means I'm not moving forward. If I help my competitors or if I help somebody else move forward, that means they're going to now come and compete against me, which means now I have somebody else who I've taught, especially my own techniques, and now they're going to compete against me. My God, I'm going to stop right there. I don't even want to get into that conversation because it's too deep. But my point being is, you have to decide for yourself, what is your purpose? Why are you here? What was the reason for you of being born? And I tell you this question because most people, this should be the first question most people ask themselves. But the reality is, I know most people aren't going to ask that, so I'm not going to even get into that. That's for a lot more of an intensive course that I would get into that with leaders, with people who are already achieving high levels of success. But my point being is, there has to come a point in your life when you actually look at your life and ask, why are you here? Why are you on planet Earth? Why were you born now? Clearly, you could have been born, I don't know, in the 1940s. Your life would have been completely different. As a black person, as a somebody who, imagine your family back in the 1940s, how poor you would have been. Your life would have been completely different. Imagine as a female, if you were born in the 1940s, your life of what you could and could not do would be completely different. What you could go after. I've just been watching this series on Netflix about women, and one of the things that they were talking about, which I actually didn't even know this until I started watching this, and the program has been talking about how women could not represent themselves in the eyes of the law. In other words, a woman could not go to this. This is the 1960s here. In 1960, a woman could not go and represent herself in court because a woman was seen as being subordinate to the man. In other words, if a woman had a problem with somebody else, the man had to represent her. Which is, a woman essentially could not own any property. A woman couldn't buy a house in 1960. And it sounds insane to even think about it, because what do you mean, Kaz? A woman in 1960s, that was how it was like. So you think about how you are now as a woman. Imagine if you were born in the 60s and how you are now and your mentality now. Imagine what your life would be like. And so clearly you've been born today and you have great advantages and some things that are disadvantages. But I'm just saying to you, why is it specifically that you were born now? What is it about your mentality, your gifting, the way you see the world that is so different and is so unique that is going to be a benefit to our generation? Because all of us have something to offer. That finishes today's journal entries. I don't know whether it's been useful. I don't know whether you found it any help at all, but I hope that it's added some value to the quality of your life. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What have you been journaling about recently? What is success to you? What is motivation? What does a good life mean to you? Write it down. Start your own journaling. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Castlemotive Guys, on YouTube if you want to get more of this kind of stuff. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.